Deep within the cold Alfred mansion sits a beast named Desi. Chained and treated like an animal, his captors try to break his spirit with constant punishment. But Desi remains untamed, his defiant yellow eyes glaring back with a wildness that can't be extinguished. Yet, he isn't the only prisoner here. Heavy footsteps echo through a grand hallway, coming to a stop. Inside a lavish room, young Selenia is also bound, the fresh scars on her arm telling a story of captivity as grim as Desi's own. The heavy chains rattle as Desi shifts, his keen ears twitching at a noise from above. He looks up from his cold prison, and his wild yellow eyes lock onto a figure on the grand staircase. It's Selenia, the youngest daughter of the very family that holds him captive. She looks down with a startled expression, a lonely princess in a gilded cage. In this massive, isolated mansion, the girl and the beast see each other for the very first time, two forgotten souls finally crossing paths in a shared prison. Despite the danger, Selenia fearlessly reaches out to the boy chained in the dark. This simple act of kindness changes everything. Fueled by her secret visits and genuine care, Desi slowly grows stronger day by day. He's no longer the helpless captive she first met. With a surge of new power, the heavy collar around his neck shatters. The chains break. Free from the basement that was his prison, he immediately makes his way up to the one person who ever showed him compassion, Selenia. In the lonely Alfred estate, Selenia saw herself and Desi as nothing more than shadows. They were trapped, unable to run, and forced to endure being crushed underfoot by those with power. Resigned to their fate, they existed as if they were barely there at all, two forgotten souls in a massive prison. Her thoughts drift back to the beginning of it all, a bitter, snowy winter day. It was on that cold, unforgiving day, with the world covered in white, that a young Selenia met the beast named Desi for the very first time. It was hard to tell if Desi was human or beast. Chained and dragged forward, his skinny body was covered in marks, and his clothes were just rags. Through a mess of dark hair, his bright yellow eyes suddenly locked onto Selenia's. The moment was shattered when her father, the Count, grabbed her arm. He warned her to stay away from that thing. He demanded she answer him, and the frightened girl quickly agreed. Satisfied, the Count told her to be an obedient child and go inside, his grip leaving her arm aching. On that day, her father gave the chained boy a cruel name, Desi, which meant trash and dregs. As Desi was dragged away, leaving a trail of dirty footprints, Selenia felt the horrible name didn't suit him at all. This was just how her father, the 13th Count Alfred, operated. He was a complete control freak who meddled in everyone's lives, from the villagers in the fields to the servants in the mansion. His own family wasn't spared his tyranny, and everyone, including Selenia, knew they had no choice but to obey his every word. Disobeying the Count was unthinkable. He would fly into a rage, his grip tightening painfully on their arms to enforce his will. Selenia's brothers each dealt with their father's tyranny in different ways. Her second brother, who had a stutter, was hidden away in a remote tower, basically forgotten. Her eldest brother, the heir, faced the most pressure. He often muttered complaints under his breath before escaping the mansion to wander the village. But Selenia could only watch from her window, a prisoner who had never known what it felt like to be free. Selenia's mother was just as cold as her father. This frail, dignified noblewoman had once been a lively and energetic person, but marrying the Count crushed her spirit. The family said a darkness fell over her after she tragically lost two children before Selly was born. When Selly finally arrived, her mother refused to even look at her, demanding the newborn be taken away immediately. Ever since that day, the Countess has suffered from constant illness, and Selly couldn't help but wonder if her mother blamed her for all the misfortune. Selly was sure of one painful truth. Just as her father wanted to erase her brother, her mother wanted to forget her. When the Countess finally noticed her, she acted surprised, coldly stating she hadn't seen Selly there at all. While the mother was a block of ice to Selly, she absolutely doted on her other daughter, Selivia. Selivia looked exactly like their mother in her youth, and she got all the affection. Even when Selivia threw a fit, demanding to be treated like the boys, their mother would only comfort her, showering her with love Selly had never known. For her favorite daughter, the Countess finally broke her silence. Selly didn't know how her mother convinced the Count, but she was the reason Selivia got to leave for the academy. This was a massive blow, as Selivia was the only one in the family who ever took care of her. On the day she left, her sister pulled her into a tight embrace, promising to return and take Selly to the capital. She begged her to stay well until then. But that was a year ago, and Selly was still trapped all alone. It's been almost a year since her sister left, and Selly couldn't help but find her mother's behavior strange. After all, the Countess had done everything possible to send Selivia to the academy, yet now she was the one who missed her favorite daughter every single day. While wandering the desolate halls, Selly was stopped by a maid named Ellie, who spotted the tattered doll in her arms. Ellie promised to fix it for her later that night, ordering her to stay put until then. This isolation was nothing new. Her father's strict rules and their remote home meant this doll was the only friend she ever had. Selly stood alone in the desolate hall. Her sister was gone, her mother wanted to forget her, and her brothers found her annoying. To her father, she was simply unimportant. She was Selenia, the child nobody in the mansion cared about. Having only ever known how to be obedient, she lived her life quietly. But now, a powerful loneliness washed over her. She desperately needed to talk to someone, anyone, and just then, she stumbled upon him. In the darkness, she found another forgotten child, just as ignored as she was. Driven by loneliness, Selly found herself before a heavy door she'd never opened. Pushing it aside, she descended a dark, winding staircase into the freezing cellar. Her small footsteps echoed in the suffocating silence. At the bottom, she saw him through the iron bars of a cell, a boy chained to the wall like a wild beast. Hesitantly, she called out his name. The boy's head snapped up, revealing glowing yellow eyes and pointed ears. A low, dangerous growl rumbled from his chest as he stared directly at the forgotten daughter of the house. Selly tried to find her voice, stammering a hesitant greeting. The boy didn't answer. Instead, he bared his sharp teeth, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. Suddenly, he lunged forward with inhuman speed. His heavy chains strained violently, and the iron bars of his cell shook from the sheer force of the impact. The raw aggression sent a shockwave through the cellar, knocking Selly off her feet and onto the cold stone steps. Scrambling away, her heart pounded as a single thought consumed her mind. She was absolutely terrified. That night, Selly couldn't shake the terrifying image from her mind. Suddenly, a soft tapping echoed from her window. A tiny blue bird pecked at the glass. Opening it, Selly offered the small creature some crumbs from her palm. The bird hopped over and ate trustingly, a rare moment of connection for the lonely girl. But just as quickly, it took flight and disappeared into the sky. Watching it go, Selly quietly wished for her little friend to return soon, a small glimmer of hope in her desolate life. Selly jolts awake, her heart pounding. It was a nightmare, a terrible memory from her past. In the dream, she watched from a balcony as hunters captured her little blue bird. One man declared he was tired of small prey and would aim for a bigger prize from now on. The chilling words echoed in her mind. Lying in the dark, Selly wonders if her constant thoughts of Desi triggered the awful memory. Deep below, Desi fights against his chains, trapped in his own private hell. Tossing in bed, Selly's thoughts race. Desi's aggression was terrifying, but she also recalls the bruises covering his body and the way the chain bit into his wounds. His breathing was strained and strange. As a low growl echoes in her memory, she realizes it wasn't just anger, it was pain and hunger. The image of her lost bird flashes in her mind. She understands that if Desi stays in that cold, dark place, he will perish too. A steely resolve takes over, and she decides she will not let that happen. With newfound resolve, Selly creeps down the cold stone stairs, a small basket in hand. She peers through the iron bars of the cell, and her heart sinks. Desi lies motionless on the floor. In a panic, she calls out his name, terrified that she is too late. A low growl answers from the darkness. He's alive. A wave of relief washes over Selly. Asking if he's hungry, she pulls a loaf of bread from her basket. She tells him she brought it just for him, a small offering of hope in the desolate dungeon. Selly realizes Desi is too far away to reach the bread. She can't throw it. What if it hits him, and he hates her for it? Rolling it on the filthy floor is out of the question, too. With no key and no other options, she makes a drastic decision. After telling Desi not to bite her, she starts squeezing her body through the impossibly narrow gaps between the bars. She reasons that her father always said she was small, so this should work. Just as she gets halfway through, her dress snags, trapping her. Just as she's about to give up, Selly has a flash of insight. Twisting her body at the perfect angle, she pops right through the bars. She lands inside, feeling a surge of pride. Her small frame is finally useful. Cautiously, she approaches Desi and presents the bread, warning him not to pounce since she stole it just for him. His yellow eyes fixate on the food, and a loud growl rumbles from his stomach. In a blur, he snatches the loaf from her hands and devours it like a starved animal. Selly watches, amazed, as Desi devours the entire loaf in just 3 bites. He's clearly famished. She tells him she's out of food for now and introduces herself as Selenia Alvord, Selly for short. Though he can't speak, he seems to understand her every word. She puts a finger to her lips, making him promise to keep quiet. This will be their secret. From that day forward, a new routine began. The quiet, unnoticed girl secretly snuck down to the dark basement every day, her small acts of rebellion going completely undetected by her family. Sully quickly learned Desi was only ferocious when starving. Once fed, he was calm. She couldn't understand why he was kept in the basement like an animal. Later, her maid, Ellie, provided the chilling answer while brushing Sully's hair. It was because he's a beast. She explained that to tame them, you take away their strength by starving them into submission. Sully argued Desi seemed human, but her detailed description made Ellie suspicious. Flustered, Sully lied, saying she was just observant. Ellie warned her not to waste her pity on him. Deep in the mansion, Selenia is warned about her father's newest captive. He's called a rare beast, an OSK, destined to be tamed into the Count's personal hunting dog. She's told not to pity the creature, but the warning falls on deaf ears. For a while now, Selenia has been secretly visiting the boy, Desi. She's brought him food and company, defying her tyrannical father's will. The thrill of this rebellion has grown stronger than her fear, giving her a quiet sense of victory. But a fateful day was fast approaching. During her next visit, Sully asks Desi what he wants to eat. She quickly runs through the problems. Soup would spill, and stealing raw meat is too risky because it would leave a trail. But the real issue is much simpler. She confesses to Desi that she's always hungry too, explaining that her own meal portion is only half the size of her palm. To make him understand, she gently takes his face and holds up her small hand, showing him just how little food she gets herself. Desi listens intently, his golden eyes wide. Sully vented to Desi, complaining that while her family feasts, she barely eats. She once snapped and demanded a real portion of meat from her brother, but he cruelly replied that the strong eat a lot and the weak eat little. As she spoke, Desi seemed distracted, scratching his ear. Annoyed at being ignored, Sully pounced, grabbing his ear to get his attention. She froze in place. It was furry and real. Overcome by a strange curiosity, she leaned in, causing him to flinch in shock as she made contact with his ear. The story flashes back to the cold, grim day Desi first arrived. From a high window, a young Sully recalls the memory, one she refuses to speak of in detail. Down in the courtyard, the massive gates open to reveal guards dragging a chained and struggling Desi. He fought back, snarling with defiance as his wild, yellow eyes blazed with fury. But his resistance was met with absolute authority. Count Alvard, his face a mask of cruel contempt, raised a heavy whip high before bringing it down with brutal force. The whip sliced through the air with a sickening crack. Enraged by Desi's unbroken gaze, Count Alvard screamed that his eyes were arrogant. He roared that he was the master and a beast must obey. From her window, young Sully collapsed in terror, her father's voice echoing through the mansion. His cruel task finished, the Count casually ordered Desi thrown back into confinement, his own hunger being his only concern. The memory was a stark reminder for Sully that her father's oppressive rules tainted every part of their lives, even mealtimes. At the grand dining table, the seating arrangement was a map of her father's power. He sat at the head, with his wife and eldest son flanking him. Sully was just a placeholder, an ignored decoration. As long as she acted like a doll, no one cared if she even ate. Her brother noticed her, sneering and asking why she was sitting there like an idiot, holding her silverware backward. Without looking up, Sully coldly warned him to leave before she decided to take his meat, too. He stormed off, disgusted. Sully set her fork down, lost in a memory of her mother. The Countess had once comforted a younger, weeping Sully, explaining that her soft heart was a sign of youth. She warned that as people age, their hearts can harden like steel, forgetting warmth and sympathy. They become unable to feel another's pain, leaving only sharp, ugly things like greed and selfishness behind. Overwhelmed by this harsh lesson, a tearful young Sully had looked to her sister, desperately asking what she was supposed to do in such a cold, unfeeling world. Sully realized she had a long way to go before becoming an adult. She stumbled into the dark cell to find Desi chained and barely conscious after the Count's cruel session. Panicked, she fell to her knees, screaming for him not to die. Through her tears, she begged him to hold on and offered him the meat she'd brought. Desperate to help, she tried tearing her own clothes for bandages. But Desi's voice, though weak, was firm. He promised her he wouldn't die and told her to stop, warning that bandages would only attract unwanted attention. Shattered and weak, Desi's voice cut through the darkness, telling Sully to stop crying. He promised her that something like this wasn't enough to finish him. Sully stared, completely stunned. He could talk this entire time? She demanded to know why he never said a word. He explained that her father already treated him like a thing, an object to be owned. He refused to give the Count another trophy to show off. But looking at Sully, he admitted that he quickly realized she was different from the rest of them. Selly collapsed onto Desi's chest, her white dress soaking up the grime and blood from his injuries. She finally confessed that she had been so terribly lonely. He gently wiped the tears from her face, telling her to stop crying before she got herself dirty. Looking up at him, Selly pointed out that he was far filthier. She clutched him, desperate for reassurance that he would survive. He promised her he would. Knowing her father's cruelty, Selly advised him to never meet the Count's gaze, revealing that he thinks Desi can't speak. Selly pleaded with Desi, begging him to keep his eyes down to survive her father's cruelty. After a tense silence, Desi quietly asked if she knew this from personal experience. With a pained voice, Selly admitted that she did. Her confession revealed the truth of her own life in the mansion. As winter turned to spring, Desi followed her advice. He stopped fighting back, and in turn, the Count's brutal treatment eased. Though his conditions improved, the scars covering his back remained a stark reminder of everything he had endured. As winter finally melted away, Selly turned 14. She had been holding on to a promise that her older sister, Sylvia, would take her to the capital. But that dream was shattered. Instead of an invitation, Sylvia sent a telescope with a note saying she was too busy with her classes. The disappointment hit Selly hard. Her maid, Ellie, noticed she was losing weight and growing weaker by the day. Though Selly tried to act like an adult about it, even looking through her new gift left her feeling dizzy and frail. Selly used her new telescope to peer at the distant village where her maid, Ellie, lived. She found it fascinating, but the peaceful scene was suddenly shattered. Through the lens, she saw a violent struggle. Guards were wrestling with Desi, shouting orders to tighten his muzzle and hold him down. She watched in horror, demanding to know why this was happening. Desi had been calm. Filled with fury and a new resolve, she raced down the stairs. For the first time ever, she stood before the forbidden door alone, determined to intervene. Selly's heart pounded. Getting involved was risky, but she knew Desi would suffer more if she did nothing. With newfound courage, she resolved to protect him. She threw the heavy doors open and stormed into the courtyard. The sight made her blood boil. Servants were roughly handling a muzzled Desi, forcing him into a tub of water under the Count's orders. Filled with rage, she screamed for them to stop immediately. The servants froze, shocked by her authority. They tried to explain themselves, but Selly coldly declared they were simply being too loud. Selly scolded the stunned servants, explaining that of course Desi was in pain when they scrubbed him so roughly. She demanded they use a soft cloth and warm water, and to take that awful muzzle off him at once. When a servant nervously called Desi vicious, Selly shut him down, pointing out that he was calm. Issuing a final warning that she would be back if they caused another disturbance, she left. The moment she was out of sight, her brave facade crumbled. Her hands trembled as she realized it was the first time she'd ever stood up for herself. Back in her room, Selly was buzzing with adrenaline. She excitedly asked Desi if he saw how shocked everyone was when she yelled. She was even surprised herself. She praised Desi too, amazed that it took 5 grown men just to hold him back. But her excitement quickly faded. Desi was completely silent, curled up on the floor. He was incredibly weak. As she checked on him, he suddenly collapsed right on top of her, totally drained. Filled with worry, she begged him to say something, but he was completely unresponsive from starvation. Selly wakes up in bed, her stomach rumbling. Her maid, Ellie, explains that Selly had fainted from exhaustion. When food arrives, Selly's hope shatters. It's just a pathetic bowl of thin soup and bread. She asks where the meat is, but Ellie has bad news. The Count has ordered Selly's portions to be cut, coldly stating that noble men prefer sickly, thin women. Seeing Selly's despair, Ellie quietly offers to sneak her some of the servants' food, a secret act of kindness that Selly immediately accepts. Ellie slides a basket onto the table, revealing simple steamed potatoes and bread. It isn't much, but she explains that she just wants to see Selly healthy again. Before leaving, she tells her to leave the empty basket outside her door in the morning for collection. Overwhelmed by the risky act of kindness, Selly thanks her. Alone, she tears off a small piece. It's cold, but it tastes incredible. But then, a horrifying thought stops her cold. She's hungry, but Desi is literally starving to death. He needs this food way more than she does. With a food basket in hand, Selly knew she had to be stealthy. She decided to go barefoot, creeping silently down the grand staircase in the dead of night. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she wondered if she should eat just a little more. But the thought of Desi, alone and starving in the dungeon, snapped her out of it. He needed this way more than she did. She pushed on through the dark corridors, finally arriving at a cell. Looking weak but determined, she asked if he had waited long. But the figure in the cell was not the Desi she knew. Before Selly could process it, he lunged through the bars, grabbing her tight. Terrified, she screamed for him to let go, demanding to know where Desi was. She cried out that even though her friend was messy and grumpy, she came for him. Her desperate words snapped the man out of his haze. He called out her name, his wolf ears appearing as he pleaded for her to recognize him. It was Desi. Her terror instantly melted away, replaced by stunned relief. Selly slumps to the floor in relief, admitting she didn't recognize him now that he was all cleaned up. Desi explains that he followed her advice and stayed calm, so the guards washed him and gave him decent clothes. He notices her exhausted state, but she brushes off his concern, saying she just felt a bit dizzy. Changing the subject, she presents the food she brought. She apologizes that there's no meat, promising to bring more tomorrow. But Desi ignores the basket. He looks her dead in the eye and says one simple word: key. A horrifying memory suddenly flooded Selly's mind. She saw Desi, his shirt stained crimson, standing over a fallen animal in the dark. He called out her name, but his voice sounded distant and strange. Selly's hand flew to her mouth, a gasp of terror escaping her lips as she recognized the creature on the ground. The shocking scene was too much to bear. All she could remember was the overwhelming urge to flee. She turned and ran, her mind a complete blank, with no memory of how she even made it back to her room. A frantic knock shattered the morning quiet. It was her maid, Ellie, who entered after Selly gave a weak confirmation. Ellie eagerly asked if Selly knew about the commotion last night, but her words died in her throat. She saw Selly huddled by the window, looking absolutely wrecked. Forgetting her news, the maid's voice filled with concern. She asked if Selly was all right, pointing out that she looked like she hadn't slept a wink. Selly just stared back, her eyes hollow and haunted by the night's terrible events. Selly brushed off her maid's concern, insisting she just had a restless night before asking about the commotion. Ellie leaned in and spilled the shocking news. A horse had been taken out. And it wasn't just any horse, it was the Count's most prized steed. The stable was an absolute mess, with huge claw marks all over, pointing to a wild beast. The official story was that a mountain beast was the culprit, a theory that made Selly's blood run cold. To make matters worse, the rain washed away all tracks, and a guard was now being punished for the incident. Selly's blood ran cold. She asked Ellie if the guard would be all right, adding that there was something else in the basement. Ellie bluntly stated it was the guard's own fault. He was the one who lost the key to Desi's cell, so now he was tied up right beside it. From the darkness, a single, glowing eye watched the terrified man. Selly's mind raced. Desi was back in his prison. Then, the horrifying truth hit her. In her panicked escape last night, she had taken the key, and now she had no idea where it was. Selly's mind frantically replayed the past. She remembered the first time she'd gone to the basement, the key clicking as it opened the heavy lock. In her memory, she held it out to a chained Desi, who gratefully took the ring of keys from her hand. A sudden, shocking realization hit her like a ton of bricks. The key wasn't lost. Desi had taken it himself and willingly returned to his prison. The knowledge was staggering, leaving her with one burning question: why would he ever go back down there? A few days passed, and the unfortunate guard was kicked out of the manor for good. He'd failed to find the key and protect the Count's prized horse, so he was lucky to escape with his life. As a new key was being made, two maids nervously descended to the basement. They found Desi's cell a complete mess, his clothes torn to absolute shreds. One maid began to mutter a complaint about beasts, but a single, menacing yellow eye glaring from the shadows cut her short, freezing her with pure terror. Terrified, the maid shoved a bowl of food into the cell and scrambled away, wanting nothing to do with the shadowy figure inside. Although Desi was back in his prison, Selly couldn't bring herself to go see him. A few days passed, and then the incident began. A shadow of fear fell over the estate as livestock started turning up dead. It began with a single chicken, then escalated to pigs and sheep from the fields. Soon, even the farm's cattle were found in a brutal, bloody mess, leaving everyone to wonder what kind of monster was responsible. Count Alvard was on a rampage. He screamed at his staff, demanding to know why they couldn't catch the beast responsible for the carnage. He was convinced it was the same creature that had gotten his prized horse. A hunter stepped forward, reporting that they'd searched every mountain path, but found no trace of the culprit. This news only fueled the Count's rage. Hiding in the shadows, Selly trembled. Her father was hunting for a monster in the wild, completely forgetting the one he kept locked in his own basement. No one suspected Desi. Selly wished desperately that this whole nightmare would just blow over. Her thoughts were shattered when her father's voice boomed her name. Count Alvard grabbed her shoulder, his grip like iron. He angrily demanded to know why she wasn't paying attention, adding he'd heard reports of her strange behavior lately. His eyes narrowed as he brought up the day his horse was killed, reminding her she had been at the stables. Selly's body began to shake uncontrollably. Seeing her terror, the Count leaned in, his voice low and menacing. asking if she knew something. Thinking fast, Selly stammered a frantic excuse, claiming she was just looking for a lost doll. She quickly apologized for her strange behavior, promising it would never happen again. Her father scoffed, turning away in disgust and calling everyone around him useless. He then demanded an update from the head butler about bringing in a professional hunter. The butler confirmed the expert was scheduled to arrive tomorrow. A cruel sneer spread across the Count's face as he vowed that once the beast was caught, he would make it pay the ultimate price. A rugged hunter with 2 massive dogs at his side arrived on the Alvord estate, surveying the land with a sharp gaze. Inside, the Countess formally welcomed the man, remarking on how quickly he had gotten there. Hiding nearby, Selly watched the scene unfold with a growing sense of dread. Her maid, Ellie, leaned in and whispered that this must be the expert hunter her father had mentioned. A cold fear gripped Selly's heart. The man hired to hunt and destroy Desi was now standing in her home. Ellie tried to comfort Selly, but her own anxiety betrayed her. She whispered about the hunter's fearsome reputation. He only pursued the rarest and most difficult beasts. His presence meant the situation was far more serious than they imagined. As Ellie urged the terrified Selly to leave, the hunter's 2 huge dogs suddenly whipped their heads around, their intense gazes locking onto Selly on the staircase. Down below, the hunter's eyes followed his dogs. He turned to the Count, coolly remarking on what a lovely lady was watching them from above. Count Alvord dismissed Selly with a wave, proudly calling her the family's jewel before complaining that she'd stopped listening to him. Changing the subject, he led the hunter away to show off his personal collection. In a hall filled with trophies from his past hunts, the Count boasted about his prized kills. But the hunter was unimpressed, cutting him off to get straight to business. He stated that he'd heard the tracks weren't from an ordinary beast. The Count's face twisted in anger as he confirmed this, revealing the creature's first victim was his finest horse. The Count angrily explained that after his horse, the village livestock started dying. They were found in a gruesome state, yet the attacker left no witnesses, vanishing without a trace. Consumed by rage, the Count snarled that someone had dared to touch his property. He vowed to make the culprit pay and turn them into his next trophy. The hunter observed this, realizing the Count cared more for his own losses than the village. He coolly stated his plan. His 2 powerful dogs would track the clever beast by scent. A sly grin spread across Count Alvord's face. He told the hunter that his hounds weren't the only impressive animals here, revealing he also kept a special dog of his own. The Count boasted that this creature was far more unique and powerful. Intrigued, the hunter agreed to see it. The Count led the way down a dark, stone staircase into the mansion's depths. As they descended, he explained he'd bought a rare, tamed OSK from a shady merchant. The hunter was surprised, questioning why such a beast was being kept down here. As they reached the dungeon, the hunter's powerful dogs began to whine and back away. Count Alvord covered his nose, complaining about the stench and explaining that the creature hadn't been washed in some time. He led the hunter to a massive, barred cell and slammed his fist against it, demanding its occupant reveal itself. From the pitch-black darkness, 2 brilliant yellow eyes snapped open. The hunting dogs cowered in terror as a young man with dark hair and wolf ears, Desi, emerged from the shadows, his intimidating presence filling the air. The hunter's tough guy act shattered in an instant. His highly trained dogs, moments ago a symbol of his skill, were now whimpering messes. His eyes locked onto Desi, and the horrifying truth clicked into place when he saw the wolf ears. This was no tamed animal. In a flash of pure terror, the hunter grabbed his gear and sprinted out of the dungeon. Count Alvord stood there completely stunned, yelling after the fleeing man. From the darkness of his cell, Desi watched the pathetic display in silence. The hunter bolted through the mansion, screaming as his dogs scrambled behind him. A furious Count Alvord yelled after the fleeing man, still confused about the sudden chaos. The panicked hunter spun around and shouted the horrifying truth. The creature in the dungeon wasn't an animal, it was a werewolf. He then gave a grim warning. Werewolves are untamable killers. If one of their own is harmed, the entire pack will come seeking relentless revenge. The hunter didn't wait for a response, immediately turning to continue his desperate escape from the doomed mansion. The hunter shared a terrifying tale with the now panicked Count Alvord. He spoke of a village that once captured a young werewolf and ignored all warnings, foolishly trying to tame it. The result was a catastrophe. The creature's pack descended upon the village, leaving nothing but utter destruction in their wake for revenge. The mansion staff whispered in fear. The Count weakly claimed he was sold an OSK, but the hunter grimly confirmed it was a werewolf. As the Count desperately asked what to do, the hunter silently turned and walked away, leaving them to their fate. The air at the dinner table was thick with tension as Selly worried about Desi. Her father, Count Alvord, made a chilling decision. He slammed his goblet down, vowing to destroy this problem before it could grow. He gave a cruel new order. No food or water was to be sent to the basement. His plan was to weaken the creature overnight. Before dawn, men armed with spears were to assemble. The Count announced that at first light, he would personally get rid of the beast for good. Selly sat frozen, utterly horrified by his deadly promise. As dawn approached, armed men stood ready for the attack. The head butler suggested increasing the guards inside, but Count Alvard arrogantly dismissed the idea. He was certain the beast was now too weak from starvation to pose any real threat. With a twisted excitement, the Count revealed his sick plan to use the werewolf as a trophy to decorate the mansion walls. He ordered his men inside to rest. Unseen in the shadows, Selly watched the whole thing, until her maid Ellie suddenly grabbed her, scolding her for being out so late. Ellie grabbed Selly, trying to force her to bed. She dismissed Selly's inability to sleep, insisting there was nothing to be done. Desperate, Selly asked if they were truly going to harm Desi. Ellie confirmed it without hesitation, calling him a dangerous beast and shivering with fear. She shoved Selly into her room, sternly warning her to stay put until morning. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving Selly utterly alone. Overwhelmed by terror for Desi's fate, she slumped to the floor, her last hope seemingly gone. Slumped against the locked door, a chilling realization washed over Selly. At sunrise, Desi was going to die. She had held onto a secret hope, picturing him one day free, living an ordinary life in a sunny town. But that dream was violently torn apart, replaced by a nightmarish vision of Red. The cruel words of everyone around her echoed in her head, the maid, the hunters, and her own father, all calling for the beast's destruction. Their hatred fueled the image of an angry mob, ready to eliminate him for good. A horrifying image flooded Selly's mind, Desi, trapped by an angry mob demanding his end. She cried out, grabbing her head in anguish. Why didn't he run when he had the chance? If he had left, this wouldn't be happening. For a bleak moment, she considered just closing her eyes and letting it all be over. But then, a sudden, sharp cracking sound echoed from within her own room. Selly's head shot up, her despair instantly wiped away by shocked confusion. She looked around, trying to find the source of the noise. Meanwhile, a guard down by the dungeon heard a faint noise. He coldly assumed the boy was finally crying out, realizing his time was up. To him, the plea was useless. Nothing could save Desi now. But up in her locked room, Selly felt it too, a desperate, silent call meant only for her. Her mind was suddenly flooded with powerful memories of their shared moments. These flashes weren't just of comfort, but of a deep, intimate bond they had secretly forged, a connection that had changed everything between them forever. A wave of resolve washed over Selly. She was the only one who had truly seen Desi, the person behind the beast. If she let him perish, she could never forgive herself. With newfound strength, she pushed open her door and slipped into the eerily quiet halls. All the staff who had talked so tough were now hiding in fear. This was her chance. A powerful memory of a secret night they shared flashed in her mind, fueling her determination. She broke into a sprint, vowing that she would not let him die. Selly races down the cold stone stairs, gasping for breath until she reaches the dungeon. From inside his cell, Desi's ears perk up. He calls her name, his voice filled with shock as he rushes to the bars. He immediately starts apologizing, confessing that he only left to prove he could hunt for himself. He never meant to scare her and thought it was okay as long as he avoided the mansion's animals. Stunned by his raw confession, Selly softly asks if he waited in this filthy place all this time just to tell her that. Desi softly admits that he waited, his voice full of certainty as he explains that he knew she would come for him. His complete faith in her shatters the last of Selly's hesitation. Overwhelmed with emotion, she reaches through the bars and pulls him into a tight, surprising embrace. She firmly tells him they are leaving this horrible place. Without another word, she takes his hand and leads him away from the cell, pulling him up the stone stairs and toward the promise of the outside world. The hunters' shouts echoed through the halls as they searched for the escaped beast. Desi pressed Selly into the shadows, his claws scraping against the stone wall. The men were confident, believing he was helpless outside his cage. They were dead wrong. With Selly held tight, Desi launched himself from the castle wall in a breathtaking leap. A soft green light glowed from his hand as they landed safely below. He gently set her down, and with a reassuring touch, they walked away from the mansion and towards their new future together. On the castle walls, Desi looked out at the sunrise, a symbol of their new beginning. Selly watched him, certain in her heart that he was not the monster everyone claimed. He was just different. Desi turned to her, his bright eyes full of hope, telling her it was time to go. But Selly stood frozen. With a heavy heart, she turned away, her hair whipping in the wind. She told him she couldn't leave, that her place was here. With a final, crushing whisper, she said goodbye. On the castle walls, just as their new beginning was within reach, Selly shattered Desi's hope with a single word, goodbye. The wind whipped around them as Desi stood frozen in disbelief. He asked her why, reminding her they were supposed to escape this nightmare together. But Selly's mind was made up. She coldly stated that this was her home, and her family was here, so she had to stay. With one last, heartbreaking apology for all he had endured, she turned her back on him and their future. Desi's body trembled as his hope shattered. He wondered if this was truly how it all ended. But then Selly's voice cut through the air with a single, defiant word. No. In an instant, Desi rushed forward, pulling her into a desperate embrace. Stunned, Selly could only gasp his name. He held her tight, his voice thick with emotion. If she wasn't leaving, then neither was he. With fierce determination, he vowed that he could never, ever leave her behind. Desi is tormented by a painful memory of his past. His own pack cast him out, mocking him for being different. A werewolf without a tail who couldn't even transform under the full moon. They called him a disgrace and abandoned him in the wild, their cruel words echoing in his head. The nightmare shifts, and he awakens with a start. Chained in a cold, dark cell, his glowing yellow eyes dart around. He recognizes his prison instantly, the Count's basement. It's the same terrible dream he's forced to relive again and again. Chained in the suffocating darkness, Desi wondered if this was his end. His captors had left him a bowl of freezing, disgusting mush he refused to touch. Suddenly, his ears twitched at the sound of light footsteps descending the stone stairs. A young girl, Selenia, appeared before his cell. She was the same girl who'd watched in shock as he was dragged into this dungeon. Peering through the bars, she quietly asked if he was Desi. He looked up, his piercing yellow eyes meeting her green ones. Desi glared at the girl, wondering if she'd come back just to stare. Fueled by rage and despair, he let out a ferocious growl and threw himself against the iron bars. The chains snapped tight, yanking him back violently as Selly jumped back in fright. He collapsed onto the cold stone floor, utterly defeated. He was sure he'd scared her off for good. But just as despair settled in, her voice cut through the silence. She asked if he was hungry, holding a fresh loaf of bread through the bars. Desi stared in confusion. Why did she keep coming back? After introducing herself as Selly, she suddenly reached through the bars and grabbed his face. He flinched, stunned by the unexpected touch. Instead of hurting him, she rested her head against his chest. Selly confessed that ever since her sister left, she'd had terrible nightmares about being alone. But since he arrived, the bad dreams had completely stopped. As Desi looked down at her, he finally understood. He wasn't the only lonely one in this cold, dark mansion. Selly continued bringing Desi food, promising to return the next day. But as she spoke, she suddenly slumped over from exhaustion. Seeing her so fragile sparked a fierce determination in Desi. He silently vowed that they would escape this place together. He would get revenge on those who had hurt them and show her his true strength. A deafening crash ripped through the mansion as Desi unleashed his raw power, shattering his prison. Selly stared in shock as he stood before her, free at last but covered in red stains, his wild nature on full display. Desi called out Selly's name, but she had already turned and fled across the courtyard, her white dress now stained red. He watched her go, confused by her reaction. He wondered if she was afraid of him, or of the mess he'd made. For a moment, he thought about escaping by himself. But then, memories of her gentle hands and her deep loneliness rushed back to him. He couldn't just leave behind the one person who understood his pain. Standing in the rain, Desi made a new vow. He wasn't leaving without her. Desi clutched the stained cloth, deciding against searching for Selly. He feared his wild state would only frighten her more. So, he returned to his cold cell, the broken shackles lying on the floor. He knew he could have escaped, but he couldn't bring himself to abandon her. He understood that if he left, Selly would be trapped and alone forever. As she held him close, Selly finally admitted her own pain. Her whole life, from her indifferent mother to her cruel father, she had always been treated as an afterthought. Selly recalled always being forgotten by her family. Fearing for Desi's life, she begged him to leave and find happiness. But Desi refused. He pulled her into a tight embrace, declaring that his place was by her side. For the first time, someone had put her first. This changed everything. Choosing to be selfish for once, she asked Desi to be happy with her. As they sealed their vow, Selly promised she would make sure of it, finally taking control of her own fate. Selly holds Desi in a tight embrace, promising to make him happy by her side. But as they share this quiet vow, chaos breaks out below. The guards are in a full-blown panic, realizing the beast's cage is open and his shackles are broken. When Count Alvard gets the news, he explodes. He violently grabs a guard by the collar, absolutely furious that his men couldn't handle one prisoner. Roaring with rage, he orders everyone to find Desi immediately, no matter what it takes. While the mansion erupts in chaos, Selly makes a bold move. She quickly guides Desi from the balcony into the safety of her own bedroom. With newfound determination, she welcomes him, announcing that he will now live there with her. She's already planned everything out. During cleaning time, he is to hide in her wardrobe, a spot the staff rarely touches. Then, pointing to her own bed, she invites him to sleep beside her. For the first time, Desi has found a true sanctuary. Selly was absolutely beaming. She excitedly told Desi that they would sleep like this every single day. But Desi felt a bit strange. He worriedly asked what they would do if someone walked in on them. Selly had a simple plan. He would just have to hide under the blanket really fast. He reluctantly got into bed, but found it too uncomfortable. He shot back up, explaining that the bed was weird because it was too soft just like her. Flustered, Desi refused to sleep there and pointed to the top of her canopy bed instead. Selly was baffled. She insisted her soft bed was the perfect place to sleep and accused Desi of being stubborn for refusing. He wouldn't budge, and they argued until she finally passed out from exhaustion. While she slept, Desi took his spot atop the canopy bed. Outside her room, the mansion was pure chaos. Guards searched everywhere but found nothing, making the Count angrier by the day. But Selly felt secretly joyful. At dinner, she confused her maid by asking for more meat. It wasn't for her. A hand quietly reached out from the wardrobe. Selly passed Desi some bread, promising to steal more soon. But Desi was more concerned about her, asking if she was always this lonely. He even pointed out that her maid wasn't taking proper care of her. Selly just pouted and called him Amine before revealing she had another friend. She suddenly pulled out a simple rag doll and excitedly suggested they play. Desi stared in disbelief. Before he could protest, Selly announced that he would now be the baby in their new game, leaving him shouting in utter confusion. Selly tried to teach Desi how to cry like a baby, but he was a terrible actor. Giving up on the game, she had him rest his head on her lap instead. As she gently petted his hair, she smiled, noticing his ears twitching cutely. Before she could even offer a lullaby, he was fast asleep. 3 days later, the mansion was still in an uproar. The hired hunter tried to flee, screaming that he never signed up to fight werewolves and was terrified the beast would bring back its comrades. The Count was livid, roaring at his butler for hiring a coward. The Count completely lost it, turning on his own son and screaming that as the successor, he should have done something. But his son fired back, questioning why he was being blamed for the beast his father bought. Enraged, the Count called everyone useless and stormed off, vowing to find a new hunter himself. His son watched him go, coldly thinking that if the pack returned, they would only target the man who had hurt their friend. Later that night, Selly finally asked Desi how he was captured. He lay on her bed, silent. Sensing his hesitation, Selly told Desi he didn't need to answer. But he decided to tell her everything, admitting he was abandoned by his siblings. A shocked Selly asked why. Desi explained that he was born without a tail and couldn't fully transform, so his pack left him behind. He wandered the forest alone until he was caught. He finished his story casually, but Selly looked utterly heartbroken. Seeing her face, Desi sat up and asked why she was the one getting so depressed. She insisted that he grew up just fine. With a pained look, Selly declared that Desi was precious to her. She reached for his hand, making a solemn vow that she would never abandon him. Desi, stunned for a moment, simply agreed and held her hand back. For Selly, this was everything. He had devoured her solitude and filled the aching void in her heart. Their bond created a new routine. Every night, as he prepared to hunt in the mountains to avoid being seen, she'd ask him to be safe. He'd just smile, telling her he got it and would be back. Selly had become someone who couldn't imagine her life without Desi. As the seasons changed, winter's first snow began to fall. One night, her balcony window slid open, and Desi slipped silently back into her room after his hunt. He announced his return to her. Selly's face lit up with pure joy and relief. With a radiant smile, she rushed to his side, her voice bright as she welcomed him back home. His return was the only thing that mattered in her small, isolated world. 3 years fly by, and winter once again blankets the Alvard estate. Inside the bustling mansion, the maids complain about their exhausting morning. The reason for the commotion is someone's long-awaited return. One maid teases Ellie, who serves Selly directly, but Ellie just brushes it off with a complaint about her aching wrist. As they walk through the halls, the maids gossip, marveling at how Miss Selinia has grown even more beautiful since becoming an adult. Her quiet grace has clearly not gone unnoticed by the staff. A soft knock echoes on Selly's door. It's her maid, Ellie, asking if she's awake. After getting a quiet confirmation, Ellie enters but stops dead in her tracks. Selly is already fully dressed, standing silently by the window. Concerned, Ellie asks if she even slept, but Selly dismisses it, claiming she just woke up early. The maid connects the dots, guessing Selly's excitement is because her sister is finally returning home today. But Selly seems completely lost in her own world, barely even registering what her maid just said. A carriage finally pulls up to the mansion. After 5 long years away at the academy, Selly's older sister, Sylvia, is finally home. Bursting out with a huge smile, Sylvia rushes towards Selly with her arms wide open, pulling her into a massive hug. She gushes about how grown-up and beautiful Selly is now. But the warm welcome is one-sided. Selly stands stiff and unresponsive, her face a blank mask. She simply welcomes her sister back, her voice completely flat. The cheerful atmosphere instantly vanishes as Sylvia realizes something is very wrong. Sylvia pulls her sister tighter, mistaking her coldness for anger. She apologizes for not writing, assuming she must have upset Selly. But Selly just tells her it's okay, quietly admitting she just missed her. As they part, Sylvia's eyes scan the hall. She immediately feels something is wrong, asking why there are so many knights and servants everywhere. The whole atmosphere feels tense. Selly quickly brushes it off, blaming their father for being sensitive. When Sylvia asks where their parents are, Selly explains their father is away and their mother is still resting. As they walk, Sylvia asks if their mother is still unwell, staying in her room due to her nerves. Selly gives a hesitant confirmation. Sylvia sighs, reminiscing about how their mother used to read her books when she was little. Selly quietly notes that their mother never did that for her. Trying to change the topic, she asks about the academy. Sylvia's face instantly lights up, gushing about how great it was. She encourages Selly to go too, but Selly just tells her she must be tired and should get some rest. After a cheerful goodbye, Sylvia leaves Selly to rest. As Selly walks to her room, she sadly remembers begging to attend the academy like her sister, only to be scolded and ignored. She pushes the door open, her train of thought broken by a surprise. Desi is sitting inside, casually perched on a table. He notes she's back early and asks if she greeted the sister she was so excited to see. Selly quickly tells him to be quiet, warning that Sylvia's room is just down the hall. Desi instantly understands, promising to be careful. Selly notices a small leaf in Desi's hair and gently reaches out to brush it away. But he suddenly flinches back, swatting her hand aside. Startled, Selly tries to explain, but Desi cuts her off, insisting he can do it himself. A cold worry washes over her. He's been acting strange lately, pulling away from her touch and refusing to share her bed without explanation. Clenching her fists, Selly's heart sinks as she wonders if he's grown tired of her. Quietly, she finally asks the question she's been dreading, if he's avoiding her. Desi is stunned by her question. Selly lays out her worries, saying he's been coming back late and even disappeared for an entire day during the full moon. She asks if he's having more fun outside than with her. He quickly claims he was just tracking prey, but Selly sees through the excuse, pointing out he often comes back empty-handed. Flustered, Desi goes quiet before suddenly pulling her into an embrace. He tries to change the subject by calling her small, but she knows he's just dodging her questions again. Selly wanted to keep arguing, but in Desi's warm embrace, she swallowed her words again. Later that evening, the Alvord family gathered for a tense dinner. Her older brother, home from the academy, sat at the table for the first time in 5 years. He casually asked if the little brother was still locked away somewhere. The Count's face instantly darkened. He accused his son of learning no manners after years away. But the brother calmly retorted that he learned exactly when to speak up. Enraged, the Count slammed his fist on the table, roaring at his son's defiance. The Count continues his tirade, berating Sylvia for lowering her family's value. But Sylvia fires back, declaring that she alone decides her worth. Unfazed, the Count announces her fiancé will arrive tomorrow, mocking that she's lucky anyone would take her now. He demands she prepare quietly. Suddenly, Sylvia rips her napkin in half and shoots to her feet. She boldly refuses to meet a man chosen by her father, revealing she already met someone at the academy. With defiance in her eyes, she proclaims he is the one she will marry. The Count absolutely loses it. He smashes his fist down on the dinner table, shattering a wine glass and sending a violent spray of red across the room. The entire family freezes in shock. He bellows at Sylvia, demanding to know how she dared to decide her own marriage. He furiously declares that her future is his to control. Unflinching, Sylvia shouts back that he can't treat her like a child anymore. The Count retorts, reminding her that he's the one paying for everything, including her education. Unfazed, Sylvia declares she'll get a job and repay every single coin he ever spent on her. The Count just scoffs at the idea, sneering that he regrets sending her to the academy at all. He reveals it was her mother who begged him to let her go. Olivia whips around, stunned, and asks her mother if her education was just a tool to secure a good marriage. Backed into a corner, the Countess makes a cold decision. She orders the maids to lock Olivia in her room until she learns to obey. Olivia screams in betrayal as the maids drag her from the room, unable to believe her mother has turned on her. The Countess coldly dismisses her, stating she has grown too arrogant. With the situation spiraling, the Count declares his appetite ruined. He violently kicks his chair back and storms out of the dining hall. The Countess stumbles, looking pale and muttering that this is all ridiculous. Left alone amidst the chaos, Selinia sits frozen at the table, trembling as the oppressive silence of the mansion closes in around her. Left all alone in the huge, dark dining room, the suffocating silence brings Selly's old childhood fears rushing back. She thought she was finally okay, but realizes the danger had only been quiet for a moment. Terrified of her father and worried sick about what will happen to her sister, a feeling like a volcano builds inside her. Unable to stand it, she makes a break for it. She sprints through the mansion's empty halls and throws open a door, desperately calling out the one name that means safety to her, Desi. Selly throws open her bedroom door, but the room is empty and silent. Her shoulders slump as she realizes Desi must have gone out again. With her last bit of hope gone, the fight drains out of her completely. She trudges over to the bed and collapses, emotionally and physically exhausted by the chaos of the night. Sometime later, she's startled awake by a gentle hand softly brushing the hair from her face. Her eyes fly open, wide with surprise, as she feels the unexpected and tender touch. Selly's eyes flutter open to see Desi watching over her. He gently asks what happened. She spills everything: the fight, the arranged marriage for Olivia, and the terrifying argument with her father. She confesses how scared she was, not knowing who would win. Leaning over her, Desi makes a firm promise. He will protect her from now on, so she doesn't have to be afraid. But Selly reaches for his hand, her grip tight. She clarifies that her fear isn't for herself. She's terrified of what her father will do to her sister. Desi's response is chilling. He flatly declares that he will only protect her and no one else. He takes it a step further, admitting that he wishes she had no family at all. Horrified, Selly calls him cruel, but then immediately asks if this means her sister won't have to marry. Desi scoffs, explaining that 9 out of 10 noble women just go through with it. But the 10th one, he says, falls for an innocent man and runs away. He tightens his grip on her hand, insisting that it's very common. With sparkling eyes, Selly asks if the girls who run away find happiness. Desi immediately crushes her hopes, stating they probably don't. He explains that a noble lady would struggle to survive as a commoner. But Selly insists that being with the person they love would be enough. She then wonders aloud if she could find happiness like that, running away with a knight. Desi's expression darkens as he asks if there's a specific knight she likes. She casually dismisses the idea, calling knights clueless and noting Desi's bad temper. Selly recalled how her father hired a private tutor to teach her proper etiquette. Her sister, Olivia, was allowed to join the lessons, which turned out to be a huge mistake. One day, Olivia completely snapped. She ripped the lesson notes to shreds, furious that the teacher was giving Selly inappropriate lessons on marital duties. The teacher fired back with old-fashioned nonsense about a wife's role. But Olivia, educated in the capital, fiercely rejected the woman's oppressive views. As the two battled it out, Selly just sat and watched their familiar argument unfold. The etiquette teacher threatens to tell the Countess, but Olivia isn't fazed. She declares she'll expose the woman's terrible lessons, and the teacher storms out of the mansion for good. A worried Selly asks where she'll learn now. Olivia scoffs, ranting about the teacher's awful advice for a wife to just lie still. Selly's curiosity is sparked. With innocent eyes, she asks her flustered sister what a woman is supposed to do instead. Since Olivia kicked the teacher out, Selly insists it's now her job to teach her what happens at night. Olivia scoffs, explaining the horrible lesson was about a wife's passive marital duties. Genuinely curious, Selly asks what a woman should do instead. With a clever look, she insists that since Olivia kicked the teacher out, she must now take over the lessons, leaving her sister utterly stunned. Olivia suddenly puts her sister on the spot, asking if she's ever kissed anyone. Completely flustered, Selly stammers that she hasn't, explaining she was taught such things were embarrassing. Amused, Olivia challenges her, asking why knights and princesses in fairy tales always kiss. Selly timidly guesses it's because they love each other. Her sister agrees, explaining that a kiss isn't shameful. It's what happens when the feeling of love becomes so big that you can't possibly hide it anymore. Her sister's words echo in her mind. A kiss isn't just a kiss. It's what happens when feelings of gratitude, longing, and sadness become too much to bear. It's a way to express emotions you can no longer contain. With a new resolve, Selly approaches Desi. She gently holds his face in her hands and leans in, initiating their first kiss. Desi's golden eyes fly wide open in total shock. Overwhelmed by her own bravery, Selly's heart hammers in her chest as she finally acts on her deepest feelings for him. Desi's initial shock quickly ignites into something far more intense. His dormant instincts awaken, and he takes control, responding with a fierce passion that overwhelms Selly. His wolf ears spring out as he presses her back against the pillows, his grip firm and possessive. The gentle kiss turns into an overwhelming expression of his pent-up emotions. Suddenly snapping out of his haze, Desi shoves Selly away, sending her stumbling to the floor. Dazed, she calls out his name, asking what's wrong. Horrified by his own actions, Desi is overcome with panic, muttering that she's too young and he's afraid he'll hurt her if he stays. Before Selly can even process his words, he declares he'll sleep outside and leaps over the balcony railing. He vanishes into the night, leaving a stunned and confused Selly all alone in her room. Furious, Selenia sat bolt upright in her room, screaming internally that Desi was a complete idiot. After finally exhausting her anger, she fell into a deep sleep. But her rest was short-lived. A shadowy figure crept toward her bed and reached out, his hand closing around her arm. The sudden touch startled her awake. Selenia's eyes fluttered open in a daze, slowly focusing on the person looming over her. It was Desi, his dark hair falling across his face, as he stared down at her in the moonlight. Selenia breathed his name, questioning why he was in her room. Without a word, Desi leaned in, his gaze intense as he closed the distance between them. The sudden, overwhelming moment left her breathless. The next morning, Selly wakes up alone, her heart racing. She wonders if the night before was all a dream, but the intense, unfamiliar ache deep in her body confirms it was very real. Overwhelmed by the reality of her decision, she collapses back onto the bed. Outside the snowy, isolated mansion, a new problem arrives. A grand carriage thunders towards the estate, its powerful horses rearing up and neighing loudly. The sound cuts through the cold morning air, announcing the arrival of an unwelcome guest who will change everything. That afternoon, the entire mansion is in an uproar. Obsessed with appearances, Count Alvard barks orders to make the estate look as grand as the imperial palace. He refuses to let his family be looked down upon, demanding perfection from everyone. Forced into a stuffy, uncomfortable blue dress, Selly feels like a doll on display. As the grand carriage finally arrives, its heavy wheels roll forward, crushing the delicate flowers her father had planted in the frozen garden, a dark omen for the day ahead. The carriage door creaks open, revealing the guests of honor. The reason for all the fuss is Count Osra and his companion, who have arrived to finalize the engagement with Selly's older sister, Solivia. Count Alvard plasters on a welcoming smile, shaking hands with the other noblemen. But the polite facade cracks almost immediately. Count Osra wastes no time making a snide comment, noting how poorly maintained the roads are on Alvard's lands. It's a thinly veiled insult, a clear power move to put Selly's ambitious father in his place. Ignoring her father's strained welcome, Count Osra's son, Brend, zeroes in on the sisters. He completely bypasses Olivia, the actual fiancée, and makes a beeline for Selly. He grabs her hand without warning, a predatory glint in his eyes. Before Selly can even react, he introduces himself as Brend Osra, her fiancé. Totally stunned, Selly stammers as this stranger kisses her hand. Her father quickly steps in, his face tight with annoyance, and corrects him. He explains this is his second daughter, Selenia, not Solivia. Brend yanks his hand back, realizing his embarrassing mistake. Disgusted by his touch, Selly discreetly wipes her gloved hand on her dress. Annoyed, Brend demands to know where his real fiancé is. Her father meekly explains that Solivia is still getting ready. This answer infuriates Count Osra, who scoffs at Solivia's supposed laziness. Flustered, Count Alvard frantically defends his older daughter's honor. Unimpressed, Osra coldly retorts that it's only right she puts in the effort to serve his son properly, solidifying his family's dominance in this tense negotiation. As the two fathers discuss the alliance, it's obvious Count Alvard is desperate for the Osra family's connections to climb the social ladder. Uninterested in business, Brend keeps his weird focus on Selly, asking if she and her sister look alike. Selly just confirms they are sisters, and Brend smugly declares his fiancée must be beautiful then. Trying to get him off her back, Selly insists Olivia is prettier. But his intense gaze never leaves her, making her skin crawl. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the tension, announcing Solivia's grand entrance. Solivia finally makes her entrance, but not in the fancy dress everyone expected. She's wearing rugged pants and a simple top, looking more like a warrior than a noble lady. A panicked maid tries to stop her, but Sylvia proudly announces this is her best outfit. Count Alvard's face drains of all color, his jaw hitting the floor in pure horror. Ignoring him completely, Sylvia marches right up to the guests. Her confident introduction wipes the smug look right off Bren's face, leaving him to meekly stammer his own name, totally intimidated. With a confident smirk, Sylvia seizes Bren's hand in a crushing grip, completely overwhelming him. Recovering, Bren insults her rugged attire, stating he prefers modest, inexperienced women. Sylvia fires back that she was just obeying her father's orders to wear her very best clothes, which sends Count Osra into a silent rage. She then scoffs at Bren's rude preferences, declaring that it works out perfectly. With a final, crushing rejection, she announces she has absolutely no intention of ever getting involved with a man like him anyway. But Sylvia isn't done dropping bombs. She boldly declares she already has a lover in the capital and plans to marry him. The announcement sends the room into chaos. Her father roars her name, demanding to know what she thinks she's doing, while her mother watches in silent despair. Completely unfazed by the uproar, Sylvia simply turns and walks away, leaving everyone speechless. In the stunned silence, a look of dawning realization crosses Count Osra's face as a terrible new thought clicks into place for him. With Sylvia gone, Count Alvard stammers apologies, but Brend cuts him off. He says this is exactly what he was worried about, but his gaze slides to a quiet corner of the room. A cruel smile spreads across his face as he points out that the Count has another daughter. Suddenly, all eyes snap to Selly. She flinches as Brend calls her a lovely replacement. Before she can even process the sudden shift in attention, Brend drops to one knee right in front of her. Selly stares down in utter shock, her worst nightmare becoming a reality. Selly freezes, her world crashing down as Brend kneels before her. Desperate to salvage the political alliance, her father turns to Count Osra. Dripping with sweat, Count Alvard stammers a frantic yes to the new proposal. With Count Osra's smug approval, her father immediately begins selling her off. He praises Selly as a gentle and virtuous lady, promising the Osra family they won't regret this new arrangement. Selly trembles in her dress, her mind reeling in disbelief as her future is stolen from her in an instant. As Selly stands frozen, her mother makes a feeble attempt to intervene. The Countess questions how they could choose Selly so suddenly, but Count Osra viciously cuts her off, demanding she stay quiet while the men are talking. The slimy suitor, Brend, chimes in with a smug smile, promising her mother that Selly will enjoy an extravagant life of endless parties. While Selly's mind shatters at how quickly her fate has been sealed, a hand suddenly clamps down on the hilt of a nearby sword, ready to change everything. Count Osra smirks, telling the Countess not to worry. He smoothly dismisses her concerns, calling Selly soft-hearted and promising to cherish her. Defeated, Selly's mother reluctantly agrees, believing this might be for the best. As the men move to the banquet hall to celebrate their new alliance, Selly stands frozen in pure terror. While they toast to their glorious union, promising to forget the day's drama, Selly's world completely shatters. She can only watch as her future is signed away over glasses of wine. The banquet hall erupts with roaring laughter as the men celebrate their new deal. But while they toast to the future, Selly sits at the table in absolute silence, a ghost at her own engagement party. The noise fades around her as she stares blankly at her untouched plate, completely numb. Leaning over, she quietly begs her mother to let her go upstairs. The Countess freezes, a nervous sweat beading on her forehead. She glances back at the powerful men, terrified of interrupting their celebration and causing a scene. Selly just pleads with her eyes, desperate to escape. With her mother's hand slipping away, Selly realizes she is truly alone. Done waiting for a savior, she shoves her chair back with a loud clatter, silencing the entire room. She coldly announces she isn't feeling well and is excusing herself to go upstairs. Ignoring the stunned faces and her father's burning glare, she walks out. Her mother quickly makes excuses, saying the tension must have gotten to her. But as soon as Selly is in the hallway, her loyal maid Ellie rushes to her side, seeing the utter distress in her eyes. Just as Ellie frets over Selly, a dark figure appears. It's Desi. He firmly tells the startled maid that he'll take care of things now. Wanting to be alone, Selly sends a confused Ellie away, promising she'll be fine. Once the door clicks shut, she marches across her room with a plan. But before she can act, Desi grabs her from behind, pulling her into a sudden, tight embrace. Caught completely off guard, Selly drops a small red pouch. Whatever she was planning, Desi has other ideas. As the pouch hits the floor, a small handmade doll tumbles out. Selly's eyes widen. It was a gift from her sister, Sylvia. Kneeling to pick it up, a wave of pure resentment washes over her. For a searing moment, she blames her sister for her current fate. If Sylvia had just accepted the marriage, none of this would be happening. But the bitter thought is immediately crushed by warm memories of her sister comforting her as a child and her mother's loving embrace. The kindness of the past only makes their present betrayal hurt even more. As Selly kneels, her resentment for her sister melts into understanding. Sylvia was just fighting for love. Selly wonders if she could ever be that brave. Just then, Desi's frantic voice cuts through the silence, demanding to know what's wrong. He grabs her hands, shocked by how cold she is. Looking at his worried face, it finally clicks for Selly. She does have someone. But before she can say anything, Desi misreads her stunned silence for distress and sweeps her up into his protective embrace, carrying her across the room. With determined strides, Desi carries Selly to her bed and gently sets her down. Dazed, she asks what just happened, but his gentle concern vanishes in an instant. Suddenly, he pushes her back against the pillows, his body pinning her in place. Totally shocked, Selly demands to know why he's acting this way. But Desi doesn't answer. He just stares down at her, his bright yellow eyes blazing with a fierce, unspoken resolve, leaving her trapped and breathless beneath his intense gaze. With a hushed intensity, Desi asks for her permission to truly make them one. Selly's mind flashes back to her mother's long-forgotten words about a couple's first night together. She taught Selly that if two people genuinely care for each other, the experience is a shared happiness, not a painful duty. Looking up at the man who saved her, Selly makes a powerful decision. She would not let her father dictate her fate. This choice, this moment, would be hers and hers alone, a silent rebellion forged in their shared solitude. At a tense family dinner, Selly noticed her meal portions had shrunk again, another of her father's cruel games to make her look frail. She recalled her small acts of rebellion, like hiding Desi, and wondered what would happen if she defied him one more time. Across the table, her father boomed with excitement, planning a lavish wedding near the capital. It was all for show, a way to climb the social ladder. Watching his ridiculous display, Selly sarcastically thought that if he was this excited, maybe he should be the one getting married. Her father suddenly commented that she had become even more beautiful in just a day. Selly almost thanked him out of reflex but caught herself. A compliment from him felt wrong, and she saw no reason to be grateful. The silence grew heavy until her mother suddenly spoke up, praising the Count's kindness. The Countess explained that Selly was at a blossoming age and was just a little nervous. Selly stared in shock. For the first time in what felt like forever, her mother had actually protected her. Selly was in total shock. She managed a quiet thank you to her mother, who immediately flinched and looked away, clearly uncomfortable. It finally clicked for Selly. This was the first time her mother had ever shielded her from the Count. But it wasn't for her sake. It was all just a ploy, a way to package her up nicely for Lord Brend. The manipulation felt awful, but that tiny bit of attention felt strangely sweet, leaving her feelings a complete mess inside the cold walls of her home. As her new fiancé, Lord Brend, rambled on, he made grand promises of an affectionate marriage filled with jewels and lavish parties. But Selly was completely checked out. Her mind raced back to that morning, panicking over the state of her bedsheets. She remembered her maid Ellie's shock and her own terrible excuse about sweating through the night. While Lord Brend gushed about how lucky he was to have her, Selly could only stare blankly. She had never met a man who talked this much in her entire life. As Lord Brend continued to lay on the charm, Selly acknowledged that most noble ladies would kill for this match. She pictured it, a life of luxury in the capital, fitting in, never making waves. It was the perfect, expected path for someone like her. But as she imagined this future, she saw it for what it truly was, another beautiful cage. She stopped dead in her tracks, staring at the cold stone walls of her home. Suddenly, she wondered how trading this prison for a fancier one would be any different at all. Trying to make conversation, Selly pointed towards a tower, mentioning she wanted to visit her sister, Sylvia. Lord Brend sneered, dismissively calling her that woman, and advising Selly not to go. He leaned in uncomfortably close, cryptically telling her that seeing for herself wouldn't be so bad, but that she probably wouldn't be able to meet her sister anyway. After that weird warning, he abruptly left. A cold feeling washed over Selly. Something was wrong. Spurred by his ominous words, she bolted towards her sister's room to find out the truth. Lord Brend's cryptic warning echoed in her head. What did he mean she wouldn't be able to see her sister? Panic rising, Selly sprinted down the empty hall. Suddenly, a hand shot out from the darkness, clamping down hard over her mouth. Her scream was cut short as another arm wrapped around her waist, yanking her into the shadows. Selly struggled, terrified, until a familiar voice whispered in her ear. It was Desi holding her tight. His eyes were deadly serious as he urged her to be quiet. A hand shot out of the darkness, clamping over Selly's mouth before she could scream. She was yanked back, terrified, only to hear a familiar voice hiss in her ear. It was Desi, holding her tight and telling her to be quiet. Turns out, he had been watching from the shadows as Lord Brend tried to sweet-talk Selly. Brend promised they could have a loving marriage and that he'd shower her with jewels. Desi's wolf ears twitched as he listened, and from the look on his face, he was having none of it. Desi's voice was dangerously low as he held her. He demanded to know who that man was, the one shamelessly flirting with her. Selly's heart sank. He had seen everything. With a shaky breath, she confessed that he was the person she was set to marry. The words hit Desi like a physical blow. Shock twisted into pure fury, his golden eyes blazing with a dangerous red light. Before Selly could react, he swept her off her feet, a silent declaration that he wasn't letting her go. Without another word, Desi grabbed her hand and took off running. A confused Selly demanded to know where they were going, but he just snarled. Anywhere. His fangs were bared as he raged that he should have taken her from this awful place long ago. Selly begged him to calm down, but he refused to let go. He couldn't understand why she was marrying her sister's fiancé. When she explained Lord Brend chose her instead, Desi's fury wavered. His voice softening, he quietly asked what she truly wanted. Desi looked her dead in the eye, asking if she truly wanted this marriage. Selly's heavy silence was all the answer he needed. Understanding her pain, Desi dropped to his knees, pleading with her not to go through with it. He confessed he always knew she was a prisoner in her room, just as he had been in the cellar. He swore that just as she saved him, he would save her. Desi begged her to run away with him, but as he held her, his tone darkened with a chilling ultimatum. If not, he would end that man. Selly trembled, pleading with Desi not to say such scary things. He demanded to know why. Was it because he wasn't human? He snarled that humans kill each other for ridiculous reasons all the time, insisting that not everyone was kind like she was. Shaking her head, Selly denied that was the reason. She gently placed a hand on his head, her expression full of sorrow. With a heavy heart, she confessed that she simply can't stand to see anyone get hurt or cry. It makes her feel completely helpless. Selly sighed, admitting she was still a long way from being an adult. She looked down at Desi and assured him that he didn't have to hurt anyone. Confused, he asked what she meant. Her voice gained a steely edge as she confessed that she didn't want that kind of marriage either. The unexpected declaration left Desi stunned. With newfound resolve, Selly announced that she refused to go through with it. She hated seeing anyone get hurt, and that night, for the first time, she was finally choosing to protect herself. Selly remembered how she always tried to be the good, obedient child. But being a perfect doll for her family only brought her pain. She realized that if she was going to be thrown around and hurt no matter what, she wouldn't just stand there and take it anymore. She was done being a pretty ornament. Hearing her powerful declaration, Desi shot to his feet. A proud grin spread across his face as he praised her for her choice. He pulled her into a firm embrace, telling her not to go through with that kind of marriage, and then commanded her to come with him. He leaned in, promising to make her happier than that other guy ever could. Overcome with emotion, Desi pulled her close, asking if they should just leave that very night. Flustered by his sudden intensity, Selly told him to wait, but he was too excited to listen. He grabbed her arm, insisting they leave immediately. Finally stopping him, Selly forced him to calm down. Confused, Desi's excitement faded as he asked why they couldn't go. With a heavy heart, Selly admitted she couldn't leave yet. She was worried about her sister. Selly explained her difficult position. If she ignored her duty and ran away, the unwanted marriage would be forced onto her sister, Sylvia. She couldn't let that happen. She knew her sister was meant to be free. Later, as Selly made her way through the manor halls, she was stopped by her maid, Ellie. She told Ellie she was on her way to see her sister, but the maid grew visibly nervous. Ellie stammered, strongly advising against the visit, leaving a confused Selly wondering what was wrong. Just as Selly reached her sister's room, a door slammed shut, blocking her way. The head butler coldly informed her that she wouldn't be able to see Sylvia. The nervous maid, Ellie, quickly explained that the Count had ordered Sylvia's quarters to be moved. The awful news sent Selly sprinting through the halls. She stopped in horror when she saw where her sister was taken. Sylvia was locked at the top of a tower, and the Count had ordered that she not be given even a single sip of water. Selly's blood ran cold. She stared in horror at the heavily barred door, refusing to believe her eyes. Her father couldn't have possibly locked Sylvia in a place like this. She rushed forward, pressing her hands against the rough wood and calling out her sister's name. A dead silence answered her desperate pleas. Selly tried to tell herself that Ellie must have been mistaken, that this was all just a horrible misunderstanding. But then, a faint, weak voice from behind the door shattered her hope as it whispered her name. It was Sylvia. Sally quickly assured her sister that it was just her at the door. From the other side, Sylvia's weak, raspy voice insisted she was all right, but Sally wasn't fooled. Her sister sounded awful. Sylvia's voice then turned heavy as she brought up the marriage proposal, admitting she heard it had been passed on to Sally. She apologized, heartbroken that her own defiance had caused this. Overcome with concern, Sally knelt down and simply asked if her sister was truly okay. From behind the door, Sylvia's voice cracked. She tearfully noted that out of their entire cruel family, Sally was the only one who had ever asked if she was okay. She then told Sally how proud she was of the young woman she'd become. Trying to lighten the mood, Sally huffed that she was all grown up now. But her smile faded as she asked how long their father planned to keep Sylvia locked away. The grim reality hit her. With the door nailed shut, her sister couldn't have eaten anything at all. Sensing her sister was dodging the question, Sally waited. From behind the door, Sylvia finally revealed the truth. She already had a lover. Sally's mind went blank. A lover? Sylvia quickly urged her to stay calm, explaining that the man was waiting for her in the village right now. Her original plan was to introduce him to the family, but she returned home only to be ambushed by the forced marriage and locked away. Now, trapped and unable to send word, she worried he didn't have enough money to wait long. Sally's mind reeled. Her sister's secret lover was in the village right now. From behind the door, Sylvia's voice trembled with fear. As an outsider, he would draw unwanted attention. If word reached their father, the man's life would be forfeit. Sally sank into thought, realizing the grim truth in her sister's words.
But then an idea sparked.
A confident smile spread across her face as she announced she had a plan to contact him. Sylvia was baffled. How could Sally, who had never even left the mansion, possibly help? Without explaining her plan, Sally spun around and bolted down the hallway. Sylvia's confused voice called after her, but Sally didn't stop. A passing maid gasped, warning that the Count would punish her for such unladylike behavior. But Sally ignored her, her mind filled with the sound of her sister's sorrow. That broken voice didn't belong to the smart, confident woman she had always looked up to. In a flashback, Sally remembered how she deeply admired her older sister, and that memory fueled her determination to help her now. A wave of determination washed over Sally. This was her moment, her chance to finally help the sister she had always admired. She found Desi and laid out her grand plan, her eyes shining with hope as she asked for his help. Desi was completely floored. He broke out in a cold sweat, repeating the plan back to her in disbelief. He questioned if she really wanted them to storm the tower, kidnap her sister, and then just drop her off in the village. Sally frantically waved her hands, insisting that wasn't it at all. They weren't criminals, they were helping her escape, creating a bridge for their love, just like in a fairy tale. Desi stared, completely baffled, as Sally compared them to fairies. He just couldn't picture himself with tiny wings. Brushing off the weird analogy, he agreed they should act fast. Fired up, Sally slammed her fist down, declaring that tonight was the night. They were breaking her sister out. Desi folded his arms, finally getting the gist of the plan. But he pointed out a major problem. First, they had to find her sister's secret lover. Luckily, he had a lead, remembering an awkward outsider who recently arrived. He would go to the village, talk to the guy, and be back before nightfall. As he agreed to go, Sally looked at him hopefully, wondering if maybe, just maybe, this act of kindness could change how he felt about this awful mansion. Under the cover of night, Sally threw her arm out, dramatically declaring they would storm the place where her sister was being held. Her sudden outburst caused Desi to trip, and she quickly grabbed him, whispering for him to be quiet. She playfully chided him, pointing out that he was the one saying storm. But her bravado vanished as she gazed up at a desolate tower. A wave of sadness washed over her as she realized that was her younger brother's room. He had been so close all this time, yet she hadn't seen him in years. Snapping her out of it, Desi took the lead, telling her it was time to go. They reached the tower, but the window was locked solid. While Sally hesitated, Desi took a more direct approach. With a single powerful kick, he smashed the window open. He grumbled about the cramped space as he climbed through, then helped Sally down carefully. Once inside, Sally proudly puffed out her chest, ready for her heroic moment. She called out, announcing she was there to save her sister. But before she could finish, Desi suddenly grabbed the hood of her cloak and yanked her back into the shadows, leaving her completely stunned. Sally's eyes widened in horror. She finally found her sister, but the sight was devastating. Sylvia stood behind bars in a simple tunic, her head shaved down to a rough buzz cut. Stunned, Sylvia asked how Sally had even gotten there. Desi pointed to her hair, and Sylvia flinched, desperately trying to cover her head. She pleaded with them not to look as Sally stared at the pile of long, severed hair on the cold stone floor. The message from their father was sickeningly clear. This wasn't a rescue, it was a punishment. Shaking with shame, Sylvia asked if her hair looked awful. She explained that their father had threatened her for disobeying him, and in the end, he actually went through with it. As tears streamed down her cheeks, her tough facade completely crumbled. Seeing her once strong sister tremble with such vulnerability was too much for Selly to handle. Without a word, she rushed forward, wrapping her arms around Sylvia in a tight, comforting embrace as her sister finally broke down and sobbed in the cold, dark cell. Selly held her sister tight, promising to help her. But their moment was cut short by approaching footsteps. Desi appeared, holding a frayed piece of cloth he'd found. He noted it was a poorly made escape rope, then questioned who Sylvia was. As he spoke, his hood fell back, and a pair of dark wolf ears popped out. Sylvia gasped in shock, but Selly quickly silenced her. She whispered that Desi was a werewolf their father had bought and was now staying with her. Realizing this, Sylvia looked at her sister with new understanding. With the reunion cut short, Selly insisted they leave immediately. A bewildered Sylvia asked how, and Desi coolly replied they'd just go out the way they came in. As the sisters whispered about his annoying attitude, Desi yelled that he could hear them. Before another word could be spoken, he grabbed them both and leaped from the high tower window. Sylvia shrieked in terror, convinced she would fall. But Selly, surprisingly calm, told her to trust Desi. As they soared through the air, Desi ordered them quiet, promising to explain the plan on the way down. As Selly asked what happened, a dark memory replayed. Her father had grabbed Sylvia by the collar, his face twisted in fury. He screamed that she had ruined his plans and humiliated their family. Mocking her belief that she could decide her own value, he grabbed a pair of scissors. With several cruel snips, her beautiful long hair was gone, falling to the floor around her. He sneered at her reflection, calling her pathetic and worthless, cruelly asking if the man she cared for would ever want her now. Alone after her father's cruel act, Sylvia stared at her reflection. She tried to convince herself her value hadn't changed, but insecurity gnawed at her. She wondered if the man she loved could still want her when she felt so miserable. Determined to regain some control, she picked up the scissors herself. With several snips, she evened out the jagged edges, just hoping not to look ugly. Finishing her story in the present, she admitted she was so embarrassed she didn't want anyone to see her, asking Selly if that was ridiculous. Selly admitted she always saw her sister as too strong to worry about appearances. But Sylvia confessed it was all a lie. She was terrified. Feeling utterly pathetic, she choked out her biggest fear, that the man she loved could never want her now. Selly instantly shut down her doubts. She declared that of course he would, calling Sylvia an amazing person. She explained that she had watched her for a long time and knew her sister had always shone brightly. Stunned by the fierce support, Sylvia could only stare back, moved to silence. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sylvia silently thanked her sister, amazed at how much Selly had grown. Nearby, a cloaked figure announced that the horse was ready. Selly had arranged everything, reminding Sylvia to meet her lover at the lakeside. As Selly took the reins, her sister called out, her voice filled with worry. Selly simply turned with a comforting smile, telling her it was okay. With a final, quiet thank you, Sylvia accepted her sister's incredible sacrifice, watching as she prepared to take her place in the unwanted marriage. Just as Sylvia was about to leave, she suddenly remembered something. She rummaged through her bag and pulled out a telescope, explaining she had found it earlier. Selly was stunned. It was her old telescope, one she thought she had lost forever. Overwhelmed with regret, Sylvia apologized, admitting she realized she'd been careless toward her little sister. She pulled Selly into a tight embrace, thanking her one last time and promising they would definitely meet again. With a final wish for her sister's future happiness, Sylvia rode off. Selly watched her go, waving goodbye. As they walked, Desi asked if Selly had explained the escape plan properly. She confirmed, saying she told her sister's lover to take a boat to the next village to avoid suspicion. Desi was concerned, questioning if the lake was still frozen. Selly reassured him it was unusually warm and the ice was melting. Suddenly, Desi sensed a change in her and called out her name. Selly stopped, remembering his grim words, that only 1 in 10 women ever leave the mansion. With sudden resolve, she told him she needed to know what truly happens to them. Selly always saw her sister as an amazing person. She was beautiful, confident, and someone Selly deeply admired because Sylvia never gave up on what she wanted. But Selly had also seen a hidden side of her, a moment when her seemingly perfect sister completely fell apart in despair. Seeing her strong sister so vulnerable made Selly realize they were more similar than she thought. For the first time, she felt a deep empathy, not just admiration. And that connection was the very reason she had to know the truth. With a steely look, Sally resolved to uncover the dark truth about what happens to the women who leave the Alvord mansion. She had to know her sister's true fate. As she steeled her resolve, Desi carried her and blitzed through the woods at inhuman speed. He finally landed, assuring her they were far enough away not to get caught. Sally asked to be put down, and from their vantage point, she spotted a figure down by the lake. It was Olivia, waiting by the boat. Pointing her out, Sally walked forward to watch her sister escape. Sally whipped out a spyglass, amazed at Desi's incredible speed. He quickly hushed her, reminding her they had to stay quiet. Peering through the lens, she focused on the figures below and asked if the man with the horse was her sister's lover. But something was wrong. Olivia wasn't getting on the boat. She was just standing there, hesitating. Sally grew confused, wondering if her sister now felt too unattractive to leave. But as she watched, Olivia's expression hardened. Her doubt vanished, replaced by a sudden, steely resolve. Sally peered through the spyglass, her heart pounding with hope. She decided it didn't matter what her sister looked like now. All that mattered was that she was her sister, and Sally desperately wanted to see a woman from that wretched mansion escape to find happiness. Down by the lake, Olivia didn't hesitate for another second. She suddenly stepped forward and grabbed her lover's hand, yanking him toward her. The poor guy looked completely stunned by her sudden, bold move. With a look of pure determination, Olivia held him tight, ready to leave everything behind. Olivia yanked her lover into a tight, emotional hug. Tears of relief streamed down his face as she led him onto the dock. From her lookout point, Sally watched through the spyglass as the two got into a boat and rowed away, shrinking into the distance. A bittersweet smile touched Sally's lips, her eyes welling up with tears of joy for her sister's freedom. As she lowered the spyglass, Desi quietly spoke from behind her. He asked if seeing her sister escape was enough, if she was satisfied now. A brilliant smile bloomed across Sally's face. She told Desi she was satisfied and then, without warning, threw her arms around him in a tight hug. A stunned Desi asked what he did to deserve her thanks. Sally pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes and simply said, "Everything." She thanked him for helping her sister escape, for staying by her side, and for showing her a new world. Sealing her words with undeniable certainty, she pulled him into a deep kiss, choosing her own future. As Sally and Desi solidified their profound connection upstairs, the mansion below descended into total chaos. The maid sent a check on Olivia found her room completely empty, and the discovery sent shockwaves through the house. The Countess collapsed on the spot from the sheer shock of it all. Consumed by a silent, burning rage, Count Alvord made a quick decision. He would keep his daughter's escape a secret for now. He absolutely refused to be embarrassed in front of the powerful Count Osra family, burying the scandal to save his own pride. The next day, Count Alvord made his move. To prevent the disgrace of his eldest daughter's escape from becoming public, he had to get rid of the potential suitors immediately. He decided to send Count Osra and Lord Brend on their way, but not before striking a deal. To smooth things over and give them what they wanted, he made a cold calculation. Since Olivia was gone, Salinia would take her place. With a cruel smirk, he sealed her fate, forcing her into an accelerated marriage to solve his own problem. 1 month before the wedding, the day arrived for Sally to leave for the capital. Her loyal maid, Ellie, was fuming, telling Sally the Count was awful for rushing things so suddenly. She confessed that she had to beg just for permission to stay with Sally until the ceremony. After helping her into an elegant dress, Ellie sadly remarked this might be the last time she could do so. But a cold determination flashed in Sally's eyes. She ordered Ellie to make her look even more extravagant, enough to truly shock her father. As Ellie worried the accessories were getting too heavy, Sally simply stated it was fine, resolutely adding more herself. Down in the courtyard, the carriages were readied for the long journey. Count Alvord put on a show for his guests, claiming he would accompany his daughter to be a proper father. But his inner thoughts revealed the truth. He was furious that Olivia's mess left a crucial trade deal unfinished. He couldn't let it ruin his profits. Just as he resolved to fix things, a stunning sight made him turn his head in shock. Sally descended the stairs, draped in a breathtaking display of jewels that made everyone gasp. Her father was secretly furious, scoffing at the waist, but already plotting to take every gem back after the wedding. While other guests admired her beauty, Sally noticed her mother was nowhere to be seen. Ellie leaned in and whispered the sad truth. The Countess had been bedridden with grief ever since Olivia disappeared. Uncaring, the Count simply announced it was time for them to leave, eager to get the journey over with. The horses' hooves clattered on the road as the journey began. Inside the carriage, Sally sat in stony silence beside her father. As a grand castle appeared ahead, the Count looked out the window, wondering about a commotion at the gates. He was furious to see his own wife, the Countess, running frantically towards them. Her hair was a mess as she desperately called out Selly's name. The Count recoiled in absolute disgust, snapping at her for her improper and grotesque appearance in front of their important guests. Furious, the Count raged inside the carriage. He couldn't believe his wife would show up looking so messy, ranting that she was acting foolishly again. He swore he would punish her as soon as they returned home. The carriage rumbled on, finally arriving at its destination. A young man immediately greeted Selly, telling her she looked even more beautiful today. But the older man beside her, likely her future father-in-law, just let out a massive yawn, clearly unimpressed with the whole situation. Selly heard a strange noise growing louder from outside. Her fiancé's father got up, annoyed by the commotion. In a flash, the window exploded inward as a dark figure crashed through the glass. The intruder landed with brutal force, slamming the old man flat on his back. He cried out in shock and pain as absolute chaos erupted outside the castle. Before the man could even react, the mysterious figure seized him with an iron grip, pinning him helplessly to the floor. The attack was swift and devastatingly effective. The man cried out, pinned to the floor and utterly helpless. The other guests were thrown aside in the chaos, screaming in terror. Everyone stared in disbelief, wondering what kind of monster had just attacked them. Through the shattered window, a pair of brilliant yellow eyes glowed with an intense light. The figure landed inside, slowly rising to his full height. Selly gasped as she recognized him. It was Desi, his wild gaze fixed forward, revealing his true, beastly nature to everyone in the room. Count Alvard's eyes widened in horror as he noticed the man's beastly ears. He pointed a trembling finger, his voice shaking as the impossible truth dawned on him. This intruder was the same creature he had kept chained in his basement. Desi looked down on the pathetic man, calmly asking if he remembered him. Terrified that the beast could speak, the Count could only stare in shock. With a dangerous glint in his glowing yellow eyes, Desi asked the Count why he thought he had come here, his voice low and menacing. With a chilling smile, Desi declared that he had come for revenge. The Count was frozen in terror, his eyes wide in absolute horror. He watched as Desi's hand lunged forward, his nails now as sharp as daggers. The terrified man begged him to wait, pleading for his life, but it was far too late for that. Before anyone could even react, Desi moved with blinding speed. A sharp, terrible sound cut through the air as the Count's desperate pleas were silenced in a brutal instant. The Count collapsed to the floor, his vision blurry. Dazed, he felt a sharp sting on his forehead and looked up in pure terror. Desi loomed over him, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. He told the pathetic man that he had spent ages thinking about this exact moment. With a chilling smile, Desi mused over all the ways he would make the Count pay for his crimes. Before the man could even whimper, Desi's hand shot out, his powerful grip silencing the Count completely as he asserted his dominance. With a flick of his finger, Desi showed just how little he thought of the man before him. He coldly told the Count that his trembling was making this no fun at all. The pathetic Count, bleeding on the floor, could only stare up in abject terror at the monster he had created. He screamed out, desperately hoping someone would come and save him. But his cries echoed in an empty hall. No one was coming to his aid. As his consciousness faded, the cruel tyrant collapsed completely. As the Count groveled on the floor, his twisted mind searched for an escape. He decided Selly should be the one to repay him for raising her. It was better for Desi to be the sacrifice. But before he could even speak, a flash of white moved between them. It was Selly, standing protectively in front of Desi. Both her father and Desi stared in complete shock. With newfound courage, Selly faced the tyrant and declared that she was not some object to be sold. Moved by her bravery, Desi wrapped his arms around her. Inspired by Selly's courage, Desi declared that he could choose his own life, too. With a final, cold goodbye for the pathetic Count, he scooped Selly into his arms. In a breathtaking show of power, Desi launched them both directly through the massive glass window, shattering it completely. The two landed safely outside, finally free from the mansion's grasp. The Count could only stare in horror, blood dripping down his face, as he watched his daughter and his prisoner escape together, leaving him utterly defeated and alone. The story that spread was a dark one. The beast of Alvard Manor had escaped. Soon, rumors flew that the creature had returned for revenge, kidnapping the Count's youngest daughter. However, the truth was far from the grim tale being told. As Desi carried Selly away, witnesses saw no struggle. Instead, the so-called beast and his victim were holding each other close, both smiling with pure joy. The humiliated Count could only rage, spreading lies about a family curse to explain his complete and utter defeat. Far from the oppressive mansion, Desi brought Selly to a vast, sun-drenched field of yellow flowers. Her eyes widened in pure awe. She had never seen such a beautiful sight in her entire life. As she marveled at the vibrant blooms, Desi remarked that he knew her old home was unusually cold. He called out her name, a gentle smile on his face. When she turned to him, he softly asked for her hand, telling her to stay still for just a moment. Selly looked at him, puzzled but trusting. Desi gently took her hand and slipped a makeshift ring, woven from a bright yellow flower, onto her finger. He sheepishly explained that he wanted to give her something more proper, but they were far from any jewelers. He promised to get her a better one later, asking if that was okay. Stunned, Selly stared at the simple, beautiful ring. She looked up at the birds soaring in the sky, then back at her hand. A soft, radiant smile bloomed on her face as she accepted his heartfelt promise. Selly called out to Desi, her voice filled with pure happiness. With open arms, she beckoned him closer before leaping into his embrace. Desi caught her effortlessly, spinning them both around in the endless field of yellow flowers, laughter filling the air. After a moment, she asked where they should go next, suggesting the capital. Desi agreed, but told her he knew of a place where they could stay for a while first. With their new destination set, he led the way towards a quiet place surrounded by lush trees, ready to start their life together. Desi led Selly to a secluded cabin tucked away in the woods. Inside, she proudly revealed a massive pile of sparkling jewelry she had brought. She explained to a stunned Desi that it was all theirs now, so they wouldn't have to worry about money. Selly thoughtfully added that her sister taught her how expensive the capital is, and she just wants them to be happy. As she dreamed excitedly about their new life, Desi quietly wished they could stay here forever, but he knew she had to go to the academy. Selly questioned Desi, noting that werewolves are famous for holding grudges, yet he never got proper revenge. Desi simply said it didn't matter, because he had already stolen the most precious thing. He suddenly pulled her into his arms, declaring that she was all he needed. A flustered Selly asked where he learned to say such things, but he just teased her for pretending not to like it. Her expression then shifted to pure determination as she reminded him that she was still wearing the wedding band he gave her.